We're at the Fort William World Cup to look at the brand new Saracen Myst downhill bike. A big shout out to Saracen for sponsoring this video. They've launched their latest range of downhill, trail and jump bikes. Head to saracen.co.uk to find out more. Let's speak to 2020 World Cup Series winner Matt Walker to find out about the development of the bike and how he sets his bike up for World Cup racing. Matt, this is your new Saracen Myst race bike. Can you take us through the old Myst and then the various development stages you went through to get to this bike here?
Yeah, I mean, it was a really long process, to be fair. It was tough at the start because we love the Myst, we raced it for a long time, and it kind of evolved over that period of probably 4 or 5 years as it was anyway. I mean, to start with, there was a bit of a craze where everyone went 29 and then eventually found mullet. I'd ridden the 29 for a little while. The bike was fairly similar. I felt like there was a lot of people in the paddock going over to the mullet setup. It was worth me giving it a go. Tried it and just liked it straight away. I just felt like it was no compromise. I felt like the rolling speed was as good as the 29er, but I just felt like I'm not the tallest by any means. I just felt like it gave me a little bit more room. I could almost be a bit more aggressive with a bike with a smaller back wheel in it.
So partly because of that, the new bike is mullet specific.
Exactly, yeah. So, I mean, you look around a lot of bikes and they've all kind of gone this direction now. So the new 2024 Myst will be, yeah, mullet only. So all the things that we liked about the old bike, you know, you'll feel in this new bike as well.
So things like the geometry? Yeah,
the geometry, how well it pedals, just like its efficiency. But then we worked quite hard with the old Myst to improve the braking and how, especially for World Cup tracks, I think the tracks, they've only got faster and rougher and the speeds are higher. I think you really have to come and watch a World Cup for yourself to actually see how gnarly rough the tracks have gotten. And it's just having a bike and a package that was able to cope with that a little bit better.
So the suspension design of the old Myst was relatively straightforward, a single pivot with a linkage. There's a lot more going on this bike. Can you tell us how you came up with the new rear suspension design and what it offers you?
From my side, it was based off of a feeling. So we started at the drawing board with what I wanted to feel more out of a bike. And I guess it was the designer's job back at Saracen to actually create how that was going to look and how we could create a bike where we could lower the weight, so lower the center of gravity, but also have the tunability to change parts in the linkage quite quickly and efficiently to give a different feeling.
So the production bike, you've got some bold colour schemes going on them, but this is even more bold and bright. What's the story behind the new paint job on this bike?
Yeah, so we've got a wild paint job for the first round in Fort William, which will actually also run in Poland in a couple of weeks' time as well. And this was all kind of inspired by Madison Clothing, actually, who make obviously all our race kit for the seasons. And the last few years, Madison always had a very corporate kind of style with block colours, very clean looking. And we just wanted to do something different and really show what Madison Clothing were capable of, really. So the paint job for the bike was kind of all inspired by the kit. We worked a lot last year on designing a few different kits for the season this year. And the bike just followed suit, really.
Now let's dive into your specific race bike and have a look at the details that help you to go as fast as you can on World Cup tracks. So firstly, can you take us through anything on your suspension that you've done to set up your bike for the track here at Fort William?
Generally, I think if you got on my bike and rode it as an average Joe, you'd probably really dislike it, actually.
And why is that?
Just because it's so hard. I think the setup for racing at World Cup level now, you need the bike to be supportive in a race run when you're pushing the bike to its absolute limit. So I think if anyone was kind of riding their local trails or just jumped on the bike for a go down any bike park trail, you'd probably find that it was way too stiff, way too fast in rebound as well. I think that's just because the bikes are traveling so fast and hitting the hole so quickly that the suspension needs to be fast to help it recover. So to give you some idea, pressures wise, I run 5 tokens in the front as well, with 93 PSI in the front and a 525 spring on the rear. And that's at about 77, 78 kilos of body weight.
So a super firm setup, yeah. And what about your damping? Is this the way that the fork and shock comes out the box, or have you got any custom tunes on that?
When we go to the Fox test every year, the factory teams get given 5 different options for compression tunes for the shock. So it's generally a compression tune will suit your bike rather than suit your riding, I would say. Some tunes work better with some bikes, depending on how linear or progressive they are. So we're on the 4th tune, so 1 to 5, 5 being the stiffest, we're on the 4th tune. So fairly stiff on my bike, yeah.
Tell us about your wheels and tyres and what you do to try and avoid punctures here at Fort William.
Yeah, so we've got the DT Swiss FR 1500 wheel set, built by DT Swiss, straight from the factory. With, to be honest, I always run this tyre all the time, the Maxxis Minion DHR2. It's kind of my go-to staple. I think a lot of people, it's probably fairly known that I like this tyre a lot. I use it all the time, especially at Fort William. It's one of them tracks where if you get a little bit of rain, it actually rides a bit better. Like, it's not so loose, the gravel and the grit kind of binds together and gives you a little bit more grip. So you don't ever really need a spike tyre at Fort William. So I think even if it was torrential rain on Sunday afternoon, I'd still be riding these tyres. The only option we really have for if it gets super dusty and dry is an Assegai on the front. I like riding that tyre if it gets like dry, hard pack or marbly. But then in terms of stopping punctures, it's obviously well known that Fort William's pretty harsh on tyres and wheels. And it's very hard to stop it, to be honest. It's part of the game, unfortunately. But we don't run any kind of cush core or it's just standard tubeless. And I think with a good suspension setup, you can really not eliminate, but decrease your chances of having problems in the race by having a good suspension setup, yeah.
Okay, and if you don't get any problems, you'll be going as fast as possible. I've seen you running Shimano XTR brakes rather than Saints. Can you tell us what you like about them and why you run them on your race bike?
Yeah, I think purely for me, it's just a lever feel. I think the Saint is an unbelievable product in terms of their power. And I wouldn't say putting the XTR brake, although it's more of a trail kind of enduro brake, it doesn't lack in power. Just purely the lever feel is just slightly different and I prefer it. And that's all it is to it, really. It's not that I've moved for more power or more feel even, it's just a nicer feeling lever in itself.
Tell us about the cockpit setup. How do you like your bikes to ride?
Yeah, so we're running a Pro Tharsis 3.5 setup. The bars are 30mm rise and 780mm wide. To be fair, that's pretty standard. I never really changed the bar width. It's kind of all what I've had for years and years now. Feels pretty comfy. ODI long neck grips. It's been pretty much a staple on my bike for the last few years. Really like them, really consistent, wet or dry. And in terms of the stack height, I don't really ride it, like you see some crazy high front ends around the World Cup paddock, but I'm not really that high, I wouldn't have said. I think I'm probably slightly under the average, if anything.
Cool, and what about the other contact points on the bike? What pedals do you run and do you like them stiff or do you like them fairly softly sprung?
Yeah, so I run the Shimano Saint pedals, have done for my whole career to be fair, never had any issues. But yeah, I do have them as tight as they'll go pretty much. With a brand new cleat, all the way up and maybe a couple of clicks back until the cleat kind of beds in a little bit and then it's all the way tight. So yeah, it's like a ski binding.
So really firm?
Really firm, yeah.
So Matt, you and the Madison Saracen race team have been instrumental in developing the new bike, and that process is always ongoing. You're always looking for an edge over the competition.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about your frame and how you collect data and how you use that to make the bike faster?
Yeah, so on our bike, we have a couple of things because we're always trying to push on, always trying to make the bike faster and basically win races. That's what we're here to do. Currently on the bike, we have a little flip chip at the front of the shock here, and that allows us to just change the suspension curve, and it's mainly focused on the mid-stroke to give us more or less support in the mid-stroke. So say for a track like Fort William, it's not super steep, it's about carrying speed. We actually have run more support in the mid-stroke, whereas you go to a track like Val de Sol, say, where it's super steep, big holes, and you kind of like a bit more weight on the back to let the bike sit in, you'd actually maybe flip the chip the other way, so you have a little less support in the mid-stroke. But the way that we collect the data and see how the bike's working through the weekend is obviously through my feedback, but then we'll always have a BYB telemetry data acquisition system on the bike, and that's always on. So there's a little port at the front there on the down tube, which is hardwired in. So we just run the box on the top, the two suspension pots, and then all through practice, the mechanic and Will be looking through the data and checking how the bike's working based off of my feedback. And we'll even run the telemetry system in a qualifying run, because it's the first time of the weekend that I'll do a full effort at race run pace, or as close as I can get to at that time of the weekend. And it just gives us a bit of an idea of how the bike's performing at that speed. You kind of almost estimate it then a little bit for the final run, because you know you're going to be going a little bit faster than you qualify in. So it's almost like a little bit of guesswork to try and guess or estimate the setup of where you want it to be.
So you'll be changing your suspension setup right until before race runs?
Yeah, pretty much. Especially if the conditions are fairly consistent, then it's obviously easier to do. Obviously when it's a wet race, it's very difficult to do that. But if you have consistent weather through the week, yeah, we'll just be changing our setup all through the week, even after qualifying on the little bits of practice we get between then and a race run. Always looking for the extra little bit, really.
Right, Matt, what are your goals here at Fort William this weekend, and what are you hoping for the rest of the season?
I'm hoping for big things, to be honest. I've had a really good winter. I feel like we've moved the bike on a lot actually from the end of the season last year. We've done a lot of testing through the winter. I've done a lot of riding myself, probably more than I've done before. Did a trip over to New Zealand, and looking forward to getting the race season started, and for sure I'd like to be on the podium.
Well, home crowd behind you, hopefully that's something that becomes a reality. And what about the rest of the season? What are your hopes and goals there?
Just to be consistently at the front. I just want to go to the bike races being in a chance of winning it. I think that's, for me, that's when racing is the most exciting. There's a lot of guys that are competing for the podium every week, and I think just to get my name right in amongst them would be really cool. And yeah, just a consistent, solid season with as many podiums as possible.
Well, it sounds like you're well prepared for it, and you certainly got a bike that's capable of it. Best of luck this weekend.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
If you enjoyed this video, please do drop us a like and make sure to subscribe. And let us know what's your favourite part of Matt's bike in the comments. And if you want to check out more amazing pro bike checks, click the link here.